Hello everyone. So I thought I would make like just a super quick unedited video to address the topic of control. I think it's something I've been popping up a lot, and definitely just let me preface by saying that you shouldn't expect to have 90% win rate against control. We're a creature deck, and they are good at killing creatures, and now they're also good at killing artifacts and everything. So I think moderating your expectations when you go into one of these matchups is important. So you don't go expecting. You shouldn't go to. You should kind of be realistic when you go into a matchup and think, okay, is this a 100% matchup? Then that should inform you a little bit how you should play these games. Or is it a 60% or a 45%? I would say this probably around a 45 to 55%, depends on the skill of the pilot, specifically it's and everything else. Don't look specifically too much at the deck list. It's quite experimental, but this is what I'm going to try next time I play skills. But the idea here is to realize that there are a couple of dynamics that are happening in this. So I'm just going to show you a deck list from somebody called Martin Dominguez. So this is their deck list, right? And so I think that there's two important concepts, or one very important concept when you're playing against any deck like Control, is that there's basically two phases of the game. You can imagine as the game progresses, you have more mana every time, right? Every turn you get to play one mana, and every time you have less cards. Right? You start with 7 cards, and you're using those cards to either make mana, lands, or you stay alive, right? So the phase one of the game is when you're limited by your mana, but you have plenty of cards. Turn one is a perfect example. It's the most extreme example. You have 0 mana or 1 mana, and you have many cards. The other end of the game, which we will consider the late game, is when you have plenty of mana, so you can cast every spell you draw, but you don't have cards to cast. You don't have spells. Those are the two phases, right? And those two parts of the game need to be played a bit differently. And importantly, the first part of the game is where you will usually set yourself up for success or failure against a control deck. So let me explain. In the beginning, there's also a relationship here with life total. So in the beginning, you have all your life, and as the game progresses, you can use that as a way of buffering. Like you can turn mana into life. You can think of a card that gives you life and you spend mana on it, but that's not very common anyway. But what you can turn normally is cards into life. So somebody's attacking you, you bolt them, use the card, you prevented the life loss. Or you can just say, I don't know, play a walking ballista, your opponent bolts it, and now you've taken a trade, but you also given your opponent some life. It's important because the lower your opponent's life is, I'm talking here from the controls, from your like the skills point of view, the less options they have, right? The more they will need to invest cards in order to stay alive, because the moment they hit 0, they lose, right? So they cannot, once you hit 0, that's it, right? So there is a point where they can use life as a buffer for conserving their cards, but there's a point where they'll need to use cards in order to conserve their life, right? So you see this dynamic is running. You have more mana, you hopefully are inflicting them damage, so the life total is going down, and they also are going down in cards, in theory, right? So they're trading. What happens in the late game is there's all of a sudden there's a change here where only life and cards matter, and mana doesn't matter anymore. So then it's all about how you get those last points in there. In the beginning of the game, when mana is limited, you need to make sure that you force good trades in your favor. If you are just trading 1-for-1 early game, you're not going to get into the late game in a position where you can pressure according to the life total because you have less cards than your opponent, most likely. So let's look at the deck list. And that's why it has become a lot harder to play against Control now, because they have a lot of ways to turn cards into mana, and then cards into more cards, or mana into more cards later in the game. And that's one of the examples you're wondering, right? So let's start early. You have Solitude, for example, is a great way to just, you can imagine, you put pressure. At some point they need to Solitude. That's what you want. If they need to Solitude you, they're 2-for-1 in themselves. And they don't have this great way to both recoup life and get card advantage in the late game, right? Solitude is both a 2-for-1 and it gains life. So you're forcing them to use it early, which then you might, then you're in a great spot, right? Then similar stuff goes with things like if they need to force of negation, if they need to subtly, anytime even if they need to cycle a load and rebuild, they are using mana in order to get more mana or in order to get more life, which is good. Once you're doing this, you're winning. If they're starting to do things like you play your 1-drop, the Galvanic Discharge, Then you play to 2-drop, those spells never you. Then you play your 3-drop, they bounce it with the fairy. Then they play a ring. Then this games become really, really hard. Or the example that everybody's hating these days, you play your 2-drop, your scales, your Sai, and everything, and they were wrath. Because wraths, normally, traditionally, they were a way to use a lot of mana, like normally 4 or more, to turn the tables on the battlefield. So basically, they would use a lot of mana and tap out to make sure that your opponent couldn't deal more damage to you. So you wanted them to wrath you. The moment they wrath you, they tapped out, and they actually basically at that point they were tapped out, and you had a free turn to do whatever you wanted. But nowadays, obviously, there's free spells to take into account, and obviously, wrath now can cost down to 2 mana, so that's very, very strong. It can destroy your lands. That's what the dynamics happening. So, if you notice that you start a game, and all you're gonna do is just cast your spells into your opponent's counter spells into your opponent's removal, they're gonna get to 4 or 5 mana. Slam a ring, slam a flage, a slam a Lorien revealed with Solitude and subtly backup. Then you're gonna be in trouble. Right? Then you're gonna probably lose this game. This game's gonna start slipping out of control. And Scales can have ways to win through that. But most of the time, if you look at the deck construction of these decks, they are designed to trade early, right? They have a lot of cheap spells, even free spells, and then slam a Haymaker, in this case, the One Ring, Flage, or even rather the Skies, and from them turn the corner and go into a late game. If anytime, for example, they cast a One Ring and you have a Needle ready, like the next turn, or anytime they cast a Flage and you exile with a Cauldron, that's a way to stabilize, try to record Flage. Or every time they're forced to wrath 1 or 2 permanents only, and you just get to slam your own ring or play another saga or whatever afterwards, then you're winning. Right? Especially if you're getting attacks in the process, because also they're playing 3 colors, so their mana base will get hurt. At least if they need to get a shock in, for example. Let's say you want to play into a counter spell turn 2. This is a very common scenario. If your opponent has played something like turn 1 Triumph, turn 2 Island, slamming that 2 mana into the counter spell is still a 1-for-1, which is not horrible, but it's a lot better if you're forcing them to fetch shock. That's really a lot better. Because if you are letting them fetch shock, at least they're losing 3 life. Which it's already, you trade 1-for-1 and 3 life. You're getting closer to your goal of killing them. If they already have mana on tap and just you slam your thing, that's kind of, sometimes you have to. That's the thing. It will take you some time to figure out. So basically, the ideal scenario comes to, you need to play a threat. And if you notice, these Jet-K decks, they only have very few ways to exile things. So we were in a Void before where everything exiled. Now, there's 3 Solitudes, 2 prismatic endings. Not every list runs this. Some lists don't even run Solitudes. Some lists run only the prismatic endings of way of exiling things. So Welding Jar is becoming better again. And, just imagine this bow is actually a Welding Jar, right? This is how I would build a deck right now. What you want to do, right, is to play a threat early and protect it, or pick a threat that even if they wrath, it's about trade for them. What you don't want is to place a Cauldron, a Ravager, a Saga, and a Drum, and then Scales into play, because that's not a bad trade. They will 1-for-5 you, and then you lose the game immediately. But if you have a Ravager and a Welding Jar, right, and you're hitting them for 2 every turn, or 3 or whatever, imagine a 1-1 that you plan on happening every time. You're keeping your spells in hand. At some point, you'll need to act. You can watch, I think it's the game of Javier versus Simon on the top 8. You should watch that video, where you can see Simon is attacking with 2 1-1s for basically 10 turns. And the Javier's at 6 life, and then he decides to wrath. If they wrath earlier, it's basically they have less mana to come back from it, they have less free spells, so the sooner they wrath you, but you're just attacking with your Ravager, you're attacking with your 3/3 Patchwork, and at some point they'll need to tap out. If they don't tap out, you just keep attacking. You're impatiently attacking them, keeping your spells in hand, making land drops if you can, don't commit sagas, you're attacking. And then at some point, they'll wrath you. They need to slam a ring. They need to do something or else they're going to lose because your creature's already resolved. And they can, of course, try to galvanic iteration. Whatever. They galvanic, you play another threat. But you play one threat. You play one at a time. You put a lot of pressure. If you see their cards are running low, they're just like trading, and they're just losing like cards, and they have no cards in hand. Then maybe it's a great moment to say, you know what? I'm going for it. I'm just bumping in my hand. Do you have an answer for this or not? And then, of course, it's great to bump in your hand and have a ring in hand or have a Hangovac. Then you can put all your counters on the Hangovac and a Cauldron in hand, for example, and then everything dies. You make 7 top tiers. You play a call and you win the game. So this is the kind of dynamic you want to play. You want to put a lot of pressure on their mana early. So at some point, they need to trade down on cards to answer the pressure you put in the life total. And then from there, you slam your Haymakers, your Sagas, your Cauldrons, your Rings. Especially the Ring is great in this scenario. If you're able to resolve a ring against these decks, you normally win. Because even though they play their own ring, their rings are more defensive tools. Your ring, if you have a ring and it resolves, if you look at this deck, at least main deck, they have no answers for it. Like a prismatic ending for 4 colors, which I don't even know. They play a Chandler's Lunch, so maybe they have 4 colors in their deck. But if a ring resolves, you can draw to your heart's desire. You can draw. I've drawn 15 cards against them. They have no pressure on your life total. Just draw, slam, and then from there you can just play a lot more aggressive. You can just, because you have this engine that will keep you drawing cards, just throw things at them until they run out of rats, until they run out of whatever. That's a great strategy. Another strategy to beat them is to say, imagine you have Phyrexian Tower. Phyrexian Tower, just to understand it, allowing us to exchange cards for mana. Much like a Force of Negation allows you to change cards for mana. Phyrexian Tower is the same. You sacrifice the thing, so you're like 2-for-1 in yourself to ramp into something earlier. So imagine you have a hand that's like Ring, Hangovac Walker, Saga, Phyrexian Tower, and something else, and lands. You play Hangovac, it resolves. Cool. And you have your Phyrexian Tower. Maybe you don't show it to them. And then they decide to do, I don't know, whatever. They play Flage, killing your Hangovac, or they do nothing, or they play on Ring, or they play a Tapland. So you realize they don't have counter spell out. And again, the only counters that counter your rings are the actual counter spells. They're not playing Spell Pierce, and the Force of Negation, which they play too. You see this and you're like, okay, top, slam the ring on turn 3. It's a great way to either make them to 2-for-1 themselves, or even better, to win the game outright. Because once you slam the ring turn 3, you're going to get so many cards that your opponent is not going to be able to come back. So the ring is super important in this matchup. I was playing 3 until now, but I'm going to try to play one of these new cards, by the way, the Hunter's Bow. I think it's kind of cool. I've been very impressed with the fighting spells, the Bridgeward Battle, so I'm really curious to see if this actually... Like, I'm thinking of a curve that is like turn to Patchwork, turn to this, kill something, and then you have a guy that has Ward 4, basically, and Reach, and you can re-equip it for only 1 mana, which seems very, very strong to me. And then I'm also trying 1 Obscure Entertainment, which is just kind of mean, but I think this card is kind of cool. Anyway, that's pre-game, like, that's game 1. Saga can do the same. You can play 1 Saga, make 2 constructs, get a Welding Jar. Then, let's say they rat you after you've spent all that. Of course, you're behind on mana, but if you still Welding Jar to do, you still have a threat they need to deal with eventually. Many games go down to this. Post-board and cards like Revitalize and Repass. Amazing. When they rat you, they don't expect to have anything left. So they rat you, and then you're in Repass, you Patchwork. Now you have a threat after they have wrath. And that's great, because that means you can keep on putting pressure, and then you can slam whatever you want, or you can just keep putting pressure and accumulating cards in the hand. Will this win you every single game? No. There are games, guys, and this happens to me too, but my opponent will go turn 1, tune the narrative. Turn 2, I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna play this is my Patchwork. I'm on the draw. My opponent's gonna spell it. Like, okay. I'm like, okay, should I play a Saga? Like, okay, I'll play a Saga and a Hangover. My opponent's gonna tap Wrath. Okay, I have a top turn. It's fine. I'll try to resolve a ring. Force of Negation. Okay. I have nothing going on. They slam their own ring, draw cards. I play another Patchwork. They kill it. The game just ends. They just draw a million cards. And you lose. They're playing very strong cards. It happens. But some games, you play the Patchwork and there will be no answer. And they'll be like, damn. They will untap. They will Galvanic discharge it. pay the ward, and then you're going to go Revitalizing Repass, or you're going to go Welding Jar. Damn. Even if they do it on your turn, they spend the skill of your turn. Third floor, they'll play a ring. Great. You play a Haywire Mat, exile the ring. Or play a Needle and exile the ring. You know, and then stop the ring. The other thing to do in this matchup, post board now. I know I'm going a bit over time, but whatever, guys. I mean, I hope this is good content. Strategy is not easy. You're going to just rush strategy, in my opinion. You need to analyze. Have you seen a Tamiyo? If you see Tamiyos, I always bring one dismember. Play or draw. One only, because I don't want too many. But if you snipe that dismember is a great way. Tamiyo is a great example of what I was saying. Tamiyo allows you to turn mana into cards later in the game. You don't normally draw cards early, but later in the game you can draw cards. So against decks that play, let's say, 4 Solitudes, 4 Subtleties, 4 Forces of Negation, blah, blah, you can think of something along the lines of 2 Tamiyo Safekeeping. What the hell's going on? Anyway, you can bring Tamiyo Safekeepings. You can bring in the middle of summer. Only you expel out of counterspell. There's not that many counterspells on the list like that. You can play the Haywire Might. The card that is being really impressive in these matchups is Disruptor Flute. Disruptor Flute allows you to not have to commit mana on your turn. Let's say the key turn 4, you pass with 2 mana, this is your opponent's turn 4. They are on the play. They slam a ring. Then on response to Disruptor Flute, they basically don't get to draw. And they also prevent any other rings to be played, and they play 4 rings. Of course, you're going to play your own ring, but damn, you basically turned off their card engine. They get the protection, but they really are in a pressure now to try to find a way to deal with your board, because they only have 3 rats or 4 rats, and they have no way to get to them. Like, you may find 1, but not 3, right? That's great. Another way, and that's just like number 1 way of playing it. Number 2 is, let's say they don't ring. Let's say they keep mana up. You haven't overcommitted to the board, so they don't want to rat you yet. End step, Disruptor Flute also. And what you name there, you name Wrath of the Skies. Now Wrath costs 5 mana to cast for 0 energy. So you don't have any energy stored. They will only deal with the 0 drops. That just turns the game a lot. Now all of a sudden, their way to get back in the game is non-existing. There's no way. They only have 4 Wraths, 2 marches, whatever, 2 prismatic, and they have 1-for-1 trades, which doesn't do it sometimes because you have Tamiyo Safekeeping, you have Revitalizing Repass, you have Welding Jars, and basically the Rat is not going to do it anymore. They can, of course, get to 5 mana, and if with a ton of narrative, maybe they can actually rat you. But it's a lot worse to have to spend 5 mana on a Rat than to spend 2 mana on a Rat. Or if they don't have any energy, then maybe you need to spend 6 or 7 mana. That we're talking already late game positions when you are having 6-7 mana to cast a spell, right? So Disruptor Flute is one of the keys of the matchup and key of many other matchups, but especially in this one, the fact that you can hold it up so you don't commit to the board on your turn, and then you see what your opponent gets to do, and your opponent decides to, play a Flage and pass. Sure, Disruptor Flute, the end step, name Wrath. Now it's their plan of staying alive until they can Wrath you. It doesn't work anymore. They're scrambling to find a way. Maybe they need to tap out for a ring. Great. Do we have another answer to the ring? We have a Haywire Might we can answer the ring with. We have Needle we can answer the ring with, and we have another result of the gun to deal with, or we can just slam our own ring and see who, their life total is under pressure, not yours. So they will get to draw less cards than you. And from there, we should be able to win again. So this is, guys, my tips on the control matchup. A bit scattered, I know, and maybe I should remake the video, but I'm not going to. I would rather put up something. This is my idea, how you could play. This is hopefully you've, learned something, understood something, how the matchup runs, playing against control in general, this idea of mana limited, card limited. Maybe one last thought. When you're in the late game and you haven't won the game, you haven't lost the game yet. So let's say we're both hellbent. We have no cards in hand. We have both 5 mana. They will tend to win those games because they have cards like Flage, Snapcaster Mage, Solitude. They have cards like the Ring, which they play a lot more, Lore and Revealed. So a lot of these flexible card advantage / enabler cards. But we do have, also Ancient Steerings. We play most Nexus, which combined with Pendulum Heaven is a pretty quick clock. We have an Order of Sagas that, drawing an Order of Saga later in the game can turn into 2 threats plus a Welding Jar, or 2 threats plus a Vase, or 2 threats plus a Pitting Needle, We even playing, Echoing Deeps or Abstergo Containment, which I actually really like this card. Just guys, if you haven't read this, you can tap it for colorless. You can pay 1 mana and add 1 mana of any color, so you can filter mana into color full mana. That can be useful sometimes. And the main uses of this card is you can pay 3 mana tap it, and exile it, and you exile. You return one historic card from your graveyard to your hand. So every artifact and saga is a historic card in the deck, and also legendaries are, so you can return Boseiju. And you also exile a graveyard. So imagine a late game situation where your opponent has a Pledge in the graveyard, you have nothing. They're counting on the Pledge, you play this thing, you exile everything, and you get a creature back, you get a saga back, you get a ring back. Not bad. So this is, we have ways to combat the late game. It's just not the place you always want to go because our deck is a synergy deck, right? So a Naked Ballista just trades. So what happens a lot in the late game is you will draw Ballista, you'll play it. I mean, you make a 3/3 Ballista. They will untap, find a discharge, kill it. Then you find nothing. They find nothing, but they find, I don't know, a Fetch land. Fetch land is a survey land that will allow them to surveil something away. So they get 2 draws in a way. And then eventually find a Fledge, and the Fledge just takes over the game. Or they find a ring. So they have more cards that take over the game by themselves than us. But we do have some, like in the ring, we have Saga, we have Observant Entertainment, we have Steerings, which can find those cards. So don't give up in the late game, but it's not where you want to go necessarily. At least a better scenario is to go to a late game when you're at 20 and your opponent's at 5. Then basically, if you find a Ballista, and it's a 3/3 Ballista, and they don't answer it that turn, they die, right? And this is a much better situation. You traded, resources, but they also lost life in the process. And if you just trade resources, then both of your lives are very high. That's a way to do it. I even would be more happy to be in a situation where both of our lives are low than that both of our lives are high, because that gives them less options to find time to find answers to your threats, and allows you to basically don't need so much time to get to the game. Anyway, guys, that's my thoughts. I hope you learned something. I hope you are happy to hear this kind of video. 22 minutes is a shitload of time for a video like this. I hope your attention span lasted this long. But I think these are important conversations to have. And just let me know down below or in Discord what you think, or on the Patreon, and we'll make more of this kind of content. Thanks, and bye.